When negotiating an option to extend at fair market value, it's very important to understand that there's a big difference between the enforceability of a lease extension option at fair market value versus a rent to be agreed upon. In leases, an option to extend or renew must clearly specify the key terms like rent and duration. When these terms are left open for future negotiation without a defined standard, courts often view such a provision as unenforceable because it's an agreement to agree at a later date. Without a practical mechanism, such as an appraisal or fair market value calculation, the courts say enforcing these provisions becomes challenging due to the lack of essential clarity. The takeaway here is very simple. It's important to specify what are the factors that the parties are going to consider in determining market rent. One of the most important things to clarify is, are you going to use market rent for renewals or new leases? Renewals tend to be at a lower rent. If you're going to use new leases, then you have to exclude subleases, lease assignments. Typically, leases with a tenant that has equity is related to or affiliated with the landlord is also excluded from those kind of comparables. Lease of a space that was subject to a right of first refusal, right of first offer, expansion option, or other encumbrances is also typically excluded because that's not indicative of market rent because of those various encumbrances. Most leases say that all factors that professional real estate brokers and appraisers customarily consider in determining fair market rent is considered. The assumption is that the parties will negotiate an arm's length transaction between a ready, willing, and able buyer, landlord and tenant. That's how you get to fair market rent. You consider comparable location, those locations which are similar in size, age, condition, quality, parking, visibility, view, signage, and accessibility. You also assume that the space is going to be marketed in a normal and customary manner for a reasonable length of time on the open market to make sure that you get the kind of exposure to get fair market rent. The critical thing is to also say that the rent abatements like free rent, tenant improvements, any kind of other allowance is going to be considered in coming up with fair market rent. You're going to consider the building services, operating expense reimbursement as part of the determination of fair market rent. You'll also consider the credit of the tenant or any guarantors to see would that tenant with that kind of credit pay this kind of rent. And the agreed use would also be another factor that should be considered in determining fair market rent. Finally, do you want to consider reducing the fair market rent based on improvements that were made for and paid for by the tenant? Because if you do not reduce the fair market rent for those improvements, the tenant will, in essence, end up paying for them twice. Once during the original term by paying for the construction, and then second during the option term because the market rent is higher because of those improvements that were paid for and done by the tenant. Another factor to consider is, are you going to reduce the fair market value on account of any real estate brokerage commission savings by landlord? That's typically not done, even though the brokerage commissions are typically less for lease renewal. Finally, are you going to reduce the fair market rent on account of any deferred maintenance that was supposed to be done by the tenant but wasn't?